Hey there, true crime enthusiast, armchair detectives and collectors of serial killer stories and facts. Welcome to, and for some of you, welcome back, to Crude Acts, a Texas true crime podcast. My name is Jen Schaefer. I'm a writer and researcher based out of Houston, Texas. My concentration as of recent has been exploring the underbelly of my city and all the surrounding areas, which includes my hometown, Baytown, Texas. My podcast is a way of sharing with you all the lurid details of what I've discovered along the way, basically to get it out of my head and into yours. You're welcome. Here's a little recap of what I've done so far. Season 1 of Crude Acts, my first season, was simply titled Murder in an Oil Town. I went over several true crime cases, from the tourniquet killer to the Texas killing fields to cases that my father worked on. He was a homicide detective for several years. My last season, season 2, was all about one case that also belonged to my father. It was the homicide of two women named Debbie Merritt and Sandy Terrell. While researching what could have led to their deaths, I uncovered rampant illegal activity that was occurring in Baytown, Texas in the mid-1980s. This case remains unsolved and continues to haunt all the people who are connected to it, including my father, who, like me, refuses to let it go. We're not done with it. There's still a lot more to come, like a book that is in development, so stay tuned for that and when that drops. But for now, we've arrived to season 3 of Crude Acts, which I titled Missing and in Grave Danger. It's about what happens when people go missing at the hands of predators. For part 1 of the season, I'm going to center on one man, a man named Dean Corll, a serial killer known as the Candyman. He, along with his two accomplices / apprentices, Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. and David Brooks, committed the atrocities known as the Houston mass murders. That story will then kick us off to part 2 of this season, and that is the discovery of a broad network of adults who engaged in child pornography, sex trafficking, and even possibly murder on film. The second half of this podcast will be an investigation into all of that, and it'll be told in real time. I encourage those of you who love to research like I do to investigate along with me. I would like this to be somewhat interactive. So I'm still working out all the details. I know that part 2 will drop March 15th at a podcast convention called Beyond the Crime that will be held in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'll be doing this first episode of part 2 live on stage, and from there on out, I'll have weekly episodes where I discuss what I've discovered and we can all talk about it. I must warn you ahead of time, and this is my disclaimer here, that this is an intense season. It's heartbreaking, it's angering, it's even sadly and awfully grotesque. I'll spare you the details if they're not necessary. The Houston mass murders alone had 29 victims, and most were teenage boys. My research for this season, if you would like to check these things out, I totally encourage you to read them because A, they're just great to read, and B, that'll help you kind of along with what I'm telling you. But there's a list of books here. There's Dean Corll, The True Story of the Houston Mass Murders by Jack Rosewood. There's The Candy Cards, written by Robert Brown. The Man with the Candy by Jack Olson. And then my two favorites, Houston Mass Murders, 1973 by Barbara Gibson, and The Serial Killer's Apprentice by Katherine Ramsland and Tracy Ullman. So those are the books to kind of get you started. This will be for part 1. And to kick this off, since I already started this series back in my first season, what I'm going to do is re-release the final episode from season 1. In it, I laid out some important groundwork, and then we will pick up where I left off and we will run with it. If you've listened to that episode already, feel free to skip it, though maybe I'd listen again as a refresher to get you going with the case. Just like with season 2, we're going to look at all angles of this case and what happened, and we're going to look at it through a prism to understand the context as much as the people who were involved. So, without further ado, here we go. My name is Jen Schaefer, and this is Crude Acts, a Texas true crime podcast, and this is season 3, Missing and in Grave Danger.